Xi Jinping is now the supreme leader of China. He's into his unprecedented third term as the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, which also means that the rubber stamp legislature will give him a clearance as the president for the third time or the third term in March next year. Now, it is not just the fact that Xi Jinping will become president for the third term and therefore he has a vice like grip over the country and perhaps a ruler for life, which could, as many believe, translate into dictatorship. But the fact that he holds power over his own party also makes him one of the most strong leaders that the country, that is China, has seen since Mao. Now, why does he have this control over the Chinese Communist Party? Here's a look at the six top men close to him who are part of the standing committee. And I'll take you through some of the names just to give you an understanding of the kind of close aides he now has around him, who will obey every order by Xi Jinping, who will also be communicating to him everything with regards to the party and country, who will have his confidence, and ultimately this will be the core team that will now be leading China along with Xi Jinping. So here's a quick look. Let's look at the first name, Li Qiang. Li Qiang is a 63-year-old former Shanghai party chief. He followed the COVID policies framed by Xi Jinping and the others to the T. Remember, Shanghai is the business hub of China, one of the most populous in China, one of the most populous cities in China. And the lockdown there caused quite a bit of misery to the citizens. However, it was followed nonetheless. Despite the criticism to the zero COVID policy, it was followed by Li Qiang. He was promoted to the standing committee. His past promotions have also largely been at the behest of Xi Jinping, or as is perceived. He will now be succeeding Li Keqiang, who is the present prime minister in China. So Li Keqiang will be out next year in March, and China will have a new prime minister, Li Qiang, who is a close aide of Xi Jinping. The other name, Zhao Leji, 65-year-old, is on his second term in the standing committee. He is a close aide of Xi Jinping and has helped him build his foundation in the starting, that is the first term of Xi Jinping. Wang Huning, he's 67-year-old, an expert on domestic policies in China as well as foreign affairs. He helped Xi Jinping develop his vision for China, the Chinese dream. Kai Qi, he's 66-year-old, promoted from the Beijing party chief, has worked under Xi Jinping in Fujian and Zhejiang. All these names, and why I'm pointing these out one by one to you, we are still left with two of them, that is Ding Zuojing, 60-year-old, another key Xi aide, and Li Shi, 66-year-old head of corruption watchdog, and one who actually got close to Xi Jinping because he converted the village where Xi Jinping had spent his youth as a sacred place. These six people will now control all the power in the Chinese Communist Party, the CPC as it's called. In the 20th Congress, these decisions were taken. This entire team was unveiled. And remember, every time the Congress gets over, it's a week-long affair, as we have seen this time as well. It happens twice in a decade. And every time there is supposed to be a change of leadership, usually the leader announces that by the manner in which they walk out into the Great Hall to face the press and to unveil the new standing committee. People generally take a look at the team and they are able to identify the successor of the General Secretary. No such thing has happened this time. No successor has been pointed out, naturally, because as was being presumed earlier, Xi Jinping would assume power as the General Secretary again for an unprecedented third term. And by not indicating any successor, it's also been made clear that he at least is going to stay on for some time now, and that tenure is not about to get over anytime soon. So he could be a ruler for life, and that is making many people believe that it could lead to dictatorship in China. And we've also seen, remember those pictures at the 20th a party congress of Hu Jintao, the predecessor of Xi Jinping, being escorted out. Now, the official version from the Chinese side that came out was that he was unwell and therefore escorted out. But many said that the entire sequence of events was in itself a telltale sign of what is to come, because Hu Jintao, too many, represented an era when there was collective decision making. But as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, many said pictures, they spoke volumes, because it was very clear that that collective leadership is not happening anymore. Xi Jinping is the person in power. So what does it mean for a neighboring country like India? India has had many problems with China of late, and largely because of territorial or boundary issues. So let's start with India's concerns. The first concern that India has, as I'm pointing out, boundary issue. The friction in eastern Ladakh has been going on now for over 2 years, almost 2.5 years now, and that friction is not over. There were several friction points, for instance, Pangong, Bogra, Hot Springs, where there has been some disengagement, where there has been disengagement rather. But we've seen the deadly Galwan Valley clashes. That was also at a time when a disengagement verification was happening by the Indian team, where India lost 20 of its soldiers. Now, the friction still remains, because we are yet to see any disengagement in Depsang Timchok. And most importantly, de-escalation has not happened. The Chinese side, the entire friction started because China amassed troops as well as ammunition on the LAC, line of actual control, which was against the protocols and agreements between India and China. And that is why India had to mirror that by moving its own men to the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. Since May 2020, this friction has been on. This friction is not over. This is muscle flexing by the Chinese side constantly, and we have seen this as the second big standoff under Xi Jinping that has happened with the Indian side. The other one happened in 2017 when we saw the Doklam standoff that lasted almost 2 months. Meanwhile, there have been reports recently again that China is once again beefing up its military presence in Doklam. There has been movement of about 1,800 Chinese troops. There have been permanent military posts, a new helipad that has been built, and new trenches that are not far from where the two armies had a standoff in 2017. Now, though Doklam is in Bhutan, it has a very strategic importance for India, and the reason being that it overlooks the Chicken's Neck, which is the area that joins the entire India, mainland India, if you speak so to speak, with the northeast. So it is strategically and security wise very important for India. That standoff happened in 2017 again under Xi Jinping because China was building a road near Doklam. And that was something that was not acceptable to India because of its own security reasons. Now, that standoff got over. Since then, we saw the two leaders, that is Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, hold two informal summits as well, one in Wuhan and one in Mahabalipuram. But things went downhill again during the COVID pandemic when the Eastern Ladakh friction started. So that's definitely one issue that India needs to watch out for, how Xi Jinping now has a framework on dealing with India, especially the boundary question, which remains very important between the two sides. As far as trade is concerned, despite the friction, we have seen China's exports to India go up by 34.5% in the first half of 2022. India's exports, though, on the other hand, to China fell by 35.3%. So clearly, the trade is skewed in favor of China. And this is another issue that China really leverages on, the kind of trade, supply chains, manufacturing that it has. It is leveraging that not just with India, but with the entire world. And the world witnessed that during the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain issues. And that is why alternatives were being looked for. Can India provide that alternative as far as providing a peg in the supply chains is concerned? India hopes it can. and also become a manufacturing hub. Of course, there is competition from other countries in the region as well, but certainly another issue that needs to be looked out for. Overall, the bilateral relationship between the two countries is not normal, as per External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who has already said that till the situation in eastern Ladakh is not normal, the overall bilateral relationship between the two sides cannot be normalized or be called normal. These are the fallouts on India and how Xi Jinping formulates a policy becoming all powerful as in the context of India will be important. Again, the issue of Taiwan, Hong Kong, the issue of Tibet, all these become important. But at the moment, Taiwan certainly is one that is being keenly watched out for because of the kind of the war of words we have seen and the escalation also when Nancy Pelosi decided to visit Taiwan between the West, that is the US and China. Trade issues between US and China and how Xi Jinping is going to handle those also becomes important. So there is a huge gamut of issues, and the world over is now keenly watching out on the next steps that Xi Jinping will take to reveal more about his future strategy. But clearly, it is all being viewed because of the fact that Xi Jinping is now the all powerful leader in China and will try to exert that kind of authority that he wants to display.